No way, he just said this. The NHL 2025 Draft Combine is currently underway, and James Hagens had some eye-popping quotes when it comes to why he wants the Islanders to draft him first overall. We're going to break it all down on this episode of Islanders Digest, but really quickly before we get into that, we noticed that 74% of you who watch these videos are not yet subscribed to the channel, so if you're an Islander fan, you want more Islanders content just like this, what are you waiting for? Hit subscribe, it's free. Our goal is 1,000 subscribers before the NHL Draft, where once again, the Islanders have the first overall pick. So if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, what are you waiting for? Join this Islanders community. Now, I've been very vocal on this channel how I believe the best prospect in the NHL draft is Mathew Schaefer and how the Islanders should draft Mathew Schaefer. And then the second best prospect in this draft, in my opinion, is Michael Misa. And if the Islanders do not draft Schaefer, they should draft Misa. However, James Hagens, my third-ranked prospect in this draft, has just revealed his quote on why he thinks the Islanders should draft him. The question in this interview was, what's your pitch to the New York Islanders on why they should draft you first overall? And James Hagens' response was, I want to be able to win a Stanley Cup as an Islander. I don't think he could have possibly had a better response, and this definitely has fans fired up and have some fans really considering if the Islanders are making a mistake by not drafting James Hagens, assuming they do go in another direction. Further on in that interview, James Hagens was also really talking about how his dad would talk about how the Islanders raised the pup, and when he was a little kid, that really meant a lot to him and his family, just the way that his father would talk about the Islanders winning the Stanley Cup and how he wants to bring that level of both love and passion to the community back to Long Island with him as the first overall pick. And one thing I do want to really talk about when it comes to James Hagens is he is not afraid to talk about the Islanders and how he loves being an Islander fan and how much this team has meant to him as a kid growing up and really inspired him to become a prospect that is now expected to go in the top 5 of this draft. And the reason why I bring that up is a lot of times prospects are really hesitant to name drop teams. And yes, in this interview in particular, they were asking what his pitch to the Islanders would be. But in general, James Hagens has brought up the Islanders a lot in interviews, while other prospects are definitely hesitant to talk about different teams and talk about who they want to be drafted by, because you don't know who you're being drafted by, and it can look really awkward if you get drafted by another team and you have all these quotes talking about how awesome the Islanders are, which definitely might play a factor into what is going to happen in this NHL draft. We still have so much time before the draft, even though it is creeping up, but this is definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, one thing I do want to note when it comes to James Hagens, and I know it sounds like I've been hating on him in previous videos just because I've made it really clear that I don't think he is a first overall pick, and I'm standing by that. James Hagens should not be the Islanders' first overall pick. That doesn't mean I don't want the Islanders to get him. That doesn't mean I don't think they can get him. They can't get him if he is not the first overall pick. I just don't think his numbers are first overall pick worthy. And for the record, they are really strong numbers. James Hagens put up 37 points in 37 games playing Boston College. I understand the skill level of the NCAA is higher than these other levels that these other prospects are playing, but James Hagens didn't dominate in college. He played very well. Putting up 37 points in 37 games is very impressive. That is by far really good numbers in college, but they are not numbers that get you to be the first overall pick. Third overall pick, likely, if not fourth or fifth, but just not first overall, which is why if the Islanders are going to want to draft James Hagens, it would make sense for them to trade down, which we're going to talk about right now. There is a good chance the Islanders do trade down if they feel like they really love James Hagens. Now, we're just not going to know what the Islanders scouting staff truly feels about these prospects. The Islanders scouting staff, for all we know, might not think James Hagens is a great prospect at all. Although, based on the fact that the Islanders did have dinner with James Hagens, we know that they are at least considering him when it comes to being one of the top prospects in the draft. James Hagens is not going to be a player who's going to be available later, especially when the Islanders' next pick is the second rounder. James Hagens is not going to be available there, so clearly they're interviewing him. They are interested in taking him first overall. But what Friedman pointed out is since there is a lot of parity in this draft, he compares it to something like the 2003 draft, where he can see teams moving down in the draft, but not by more than 1 or 2 spots in this, and they would have to basically know the player they want is going to be available at that slot. And that really opens up the door for the Islanders potentially to draft James Hagens 3rd overall. I think if there is a trade to happen, I know we've talked about the Islanders potentially trading from 1st to 2nd overall to pick up Michael Misa and get a package there. I think there's too much parity between Misa and Schaefer to really pick up a massive package from the Sharks, unless the Sharks are really willing to overpay. But with the difference between the 1st and 3rd overall pick, there's a good chance the Islanders could pick up a big package from the Chicago Blackhawks if they're in love with Michael Misa or Mathew Schaefer, although it seems like from what the Blackhawks are looking for, they would be more interested in Schaefer. Although you do have to note when it comes to this, part of the reason why there is going to be a big package if the Islanders do trade down from 1st to 3rd is because teams think there is a big difference between James Hagens and Mathew Schaefer, which is something you do have to note when you're considering this. Still, it could be tempting for the Islanders to really speed up this retool, rebuild, whatever you want to call it, and really pick up another solid additional prospect in addition to James Hagens. Again, you should only do this if the Islanders truly believe that other teams are underrating James Hagens. Again, we don't know that is the case, but this is definitely something to consider. But something else you do have to consider, and this is something I've really been thinking about, especially with James Hagens constantly going on all these podcasts and talking about the New York Islanders, really making it clear that he wants to be an Islander, especially considering he's a player who already plays in college. Teams are also willing to trade down in this draft. There's definitely going to be a lot of trading, especially later on in this draft after we get the first 3 picks. Again, I don't think the Islanders are going to trade the first overall pick. It's worth talking about because it definitely can happen, but it definitely isn't likely, especially when you consider how rare those trades truly are. But there's a chance that James Hagens might slip, and one of the reasons he might slip is simply because he keeps on talking about the Islanders in these interviews. And if you're a team who is drafting a player 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th overall with the hopes of being your top player for the next 15 years, it's not really good for you on draft day that he's talking about how much he wants to go to another team. And I think there definitely is a scenario where if Hagens does slip, the Islanders can trade back into this draft. We're going to really talk about what that can look like. Say you're Chicago, say you're Utah, say you're Nashville, and you have all these talk about how this kid loves the Islanders. Philadelphia in particular, your division rival is the New York Islanders. You probably don't want your first round pick in the draft to be somebody who's constantly talking about how he wants to be an Islander. And you can definitely see, especially where there is a lot of parity between these prospects, and that's the big thing. If James Hagens was lights ahead of guys like Porter Martone or Anton Frandl, then you likely would see these teams draft him anyway. But in this draft, there really is a tier 2 where there is a lot of parity between these players. Even players like Radim Murtha or Roger McQueen are getting a lot of attention who can potentially be high draft picks. And as a result, you could really potentially see James Hagens slip down. And while it would be really hard, I think, for the Islanders to trade for the 4th overall pick to get him at Utah, if he slips to 5, 6, 7, if he slips to 8 or 9, Seattle or Buffalo, that is really the range where I'm looking. And I could see the Islanders definitely coming back in to draft James Hagens. Now, I don't think he slips anywhere past 10. I think if he gets to Anaheim, he's going to draft. They are going to draft him. If he gets to Pittsburgh or the Rangers, I think they're almost definitely going to draft James Hagens because there is a drop off after 8, 9, and 10. But there is a scenario where he does slip down further than what he deserves. And I truly believe that James Hagens deserves to be 3rd overall. But it is worth considering, especially when you hear this prospect talking so much about the Islanders. He might be either unknowingly or maybe kind of trying to help his way to the Islanders in a way that some of us really aren't expecting. That's definitely going to be something worth keeping an eye on. Again, with Buffalo, who knows what they're willing to trade that pick for. This is a team that really has all the prospects in the world already. They're probably looking for players who can somehow make that team relevant. Now, the issue with trading with Buffalo is simply anybody with any sort of trade protection does not want to go to Buffalo. But Seattle is also an interesting choice, and I do think they want to draft at that pick, but you really don't know what they're thinking. And if the Islanders could put a package together, you know, they have a lot of future assets. They have 2 picks in next year's draft. I'd be very hesitant to trade the Islanders' first pick in next year's draft because that might be Gavin McKenna. But you never know what will happen, and this is definitely something to keep an eye on, especially if the Islanders are able to trade back later into this draft, which I think is going to happen. I don't really have any intel proving that, but there is a lot of feeling if the Islanders are going to make a move at this draft, it could be to get back later in on the draft, and then from there, If Hagens is slipping, the Islanders can certainly trade up to try to bring him home. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. Do you want to see the Islanders bring James Hagens home, or are you just more focused on them drafting the best player available, and you don't really want to see them overpay in a scenario just to bring Hagens to Long Island? Love to know your thoughts in the comments on that as always. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. My name is Patrick Nilan. This is Islanders Digest. Let's go Islanders!